Okay, thank you for everyone that's here. This is the Village of Westchester's Home Rule Informational Meeting. I'm Krista Brazel, and I'm a resident of 35 years or 36 years, and we have the Mayor of Batavia here. You can ask any questions at the end after his presentation. This is Jeff Schielke, and he will give us all the facts. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Among the mayors of the 7-county Chicago region, I'm kind of the old man in the room. I've been in office for 10 terms, 10 4-year terms, and Mayor Tamburino over next door, he and I got elected on the same day in 1981. So if any of you watch his career, I've had the same length of time that he has. There's also a third one of us, the mayor of Palos Hills, was elected in 1981. And the mayor down in Hodgkins has been in office a little bit longer than we had. I think he may have gotten appointed because something happened, somebody died or something down there. So, but he's maybe a few months ahead of us as longest serving mayors in the state of Illinois now. I was asked to come in here today and talk to you a little bit about home rule in Batavia, Illinois. And we started home rule before we got to the 25,000 magic mark, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Just let me give you a little history of our town, because it's been suggested to me that Westchester and Batavia are two much different places. And I don't know if I think you are. I serve as the chairman of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning's Council of Mayors Downtown, which is the group that distributes all the federal transportation dollars to the towns in the 7-county region. We have 12 sub-regional councils. Westchester's in what we call the West Central Council. And the money comes in every year from the feds, and we divide the money up by a formula of population, arterial road miles. So I think everybody at the table feels they get their fair share. And then we hand the monies off to the local councils, and they make the decision as to how the money is going to be spent in what town and whatever. And we try to keep the federal government and Chicago's role out of it. So I think that's a good program. But because I have that, there's 284 cities in the 7-county area, including the city of Chicago. And during the last couple of years, I probably have talked to almost every mayor of all 284, because they all are looking for something or want advice on how to get federal money or whatever's going on. So I would just share with you that, I think that my observations are Westchester is a well-run town. I've never heard any suggestions that there's some shenanigan going on here. Anything strange is happening. There are some not far away that I will tell you that's not the case, but you guys are pretty clean over here, if you ask me. So making that statement, let me just go back to Batavia for a moment. I feel I really live in a blessed community because in 1850, we were the second city in the Chicago area formed after Naperville. Naperville's number one. They were formed in 1831. Batavia was formed in 1833, the same year as the city of Chicago. And so we've been around a long time. So in about 1850, the Civil War things were starting to happen. And so my town became a haven for the abolitionist movement. I had 3 churches, the Congregationalists, the Episcopals, and the Methodists, and they all got really involved in housing runaway slaves from the South, and we had a number of those folks come to town. And because of that, we became very early on a very integrated community of every religion, race, color, creed, sexual preference, whatever you want to say, was in Batavia, and it's still there. And I will suggest that one of the great blessings of my life was, as a kid growing up in Batavia, all my friends were of every race, color, nationality, whatever. And that's always been a real strong point of our town, is that we have this great diversity and ethnicity that exists with us. And because of that, I think that we've certainly tried to hold our heads very high in the region. We've tried to do certain things that we thought were in the best interest. And so when I got elected mayor in 1981, we had a couple of problems going on. We had a very weak sales tax base. We were getting about $500,000 a year for everything that we had going on in town. So we had some land out to the right west of our town called Randall Road Corridor. And our city had originally planned it for all residential housing, and I ran under the platform that we should change that and change it to commercial. And so my two neighbors to the north, which are Geneva and St. Charles, they kind of subscribed to the same idea. And so we kind of broke the old zoning and we brought in, let the world come in. And it happened just as some other things were happening, some new residential housing. And before it was over with, we have now constructed over 5 million square feet of retail and business in the Randall Road corridor of the Fox River from Main Street in Batavia up to Main Street in St. Charles. And my sales tax revenue from the $500,000 that we were doing in 1981, my sales tax last year was $8,750,000. So that's allowed me to do a lot of nice things. Let me just say that. It hit me at a time when I needed to expand the police and fire departments. We were getting a large number of ambulance calls. And the other thing that our area is very attractive to is senior housing communities. And so right now in Batavia, I have 5 different ones, one of them being the Homestead, which is one of the largest ones in the Chicagoland region. Geneva has 3, and I believe St. Charles has 4. So what that has done for us, they're all great people. They don't cause any trouble, and most of them have money to spend. But what they do is they need the ambulance quite often. So we're running the wheels off the ambulance. So we combined our ambulance service in the 3 towns into one, and I serve as chairman of that. And we run them out of our fire stations with a private contractor, and we handle a lot of ambulance calls. So I had to have some revenue to deal with that. So that's been one of the real salvations of us. Another thing that we had is that we have had a population explosion. When I was elected in 81, the population of Batavia was 12,574. And in our last census in 2010, our population had gone to 26,045. So we had grown, more than doubled our population in that period of time. Right now, I have about 416 new living units under construction. Most of them are townhouses. But we do have a great amount of new growth happening as people wanting to continue to move in. And we also have a couple of unique things that probably do separate us from Westchester. On our east boundary is the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, which is 6,800 acres, but it's totally off the tax rolls and it's totally off the development rolls. So when that came to Batavia in 1966, had that not happened, I would suggest that today I'd be a much bigger town with a lot more problems than I already have, because it's 6,800 acres is off the development rolls. Then on my southwest side, I have Mooseheart, which is the national orphanage of the Moose Lodge and the world headquarters for the Moose Lodge. And they have about a 1,400 acre site, of which they now have their orphanage has kind of slowed down in participation. So now they've come and we've annexed 494 acres of their property, which is a farm, and we have annexed it to become a senior living community of 830 units and 104 acres of business zoning along this Randall Road corridor. So they'll make out pretty good on that. So will the city. So I've had some interesting situations, but what the sales tax has done for me is that I now have more revenue for my sales tax than I have to charge people for my property tax. So my property tax rate in the city of Batavia, just the city's portion of the property tax, is about 73 cents. It vacillates between 73 and 80 cents depending on what's going on. Every time it's different every year. So that's $7,574 is my total property tax, and my sales tax is $8,735,000. So we got more sales tax paying the bills than we do property tax. And if you compare my property tax to many of my neighbors, I got one neighbor whose property tax rate is, mine's 73 cents, theirs is $2.16. So there's a big difference of what we're able to do with some of this stuff that we're doing. So in 2006, we were not home rule yet, but I decided that it would be time for us to try to impose a home rule sales tax. Now, the only way you could do that would be to go to referendum in 2006. So we went to referendum, and I announced that what we were going to do with the half-cent sales tax is that we were going to tear down our two existing fire stations. We have one on each side of the Fox River, and we would replace them with two brand new buildings. Now, there was a little political thought in my mind as I did this because, number one, we needed to do it, but secondly, if you want to go out and find something that a lot of people like or are endeared to, it's your fire department and your ambulance service. So we went out and hosted a referendum with the commitment that the money would be spent to generate enough sales tax to pay the bonds we were going to have to issue. And at the end of the day, the referendum passed with 72% of the vote. Now, that's a pretty high volume ratio for a referendum, but we got 72% voted for it. So we went out and issued the bonds for $11.7 million, and I'm proud to sit here to tell you that we're now 7 years into paying the bonds back, and they've always been paid back by the sales tax. We've never had to go to the property tax for any of it. So I'm feeling good about that. Well, then when we got to 2010, when we went over the home rule thing, we got some other broad ideas. Right now in Batavia, because of Fermilab and other things that have happened, we have 844 high-density apartment complex, or not, apartments in about 7 different complexes, several of which have been somewhat problematic. And so we've spent some time about it. So we went ahead and enacted what we call a crime-free housing ordinance, which basically says that if you misbehave yourself and you're living in this apartment complex in Batavia and you commit a crime that we find out about, we go to the landlord and say they're out of here. And we've done it now 7 times, and I'm expecting to be challenged legally someday about it, but everybody just kind of picks up and walks away. So what have I been able to do with this crime-free housing program? Well, in one of my complexes, I had a gentleman who apparently was a drug dealer. We didn't know it at the time, and he was fearful he was going to get ambushed. So he went out and bought himself 2 automatic pistols. And then he proceeded to go to the front and back doors of his apartment building and empty out the flower pot and proceeded to bury an automatic weapon in the base of each flower pot. And so, needless to say, the kids in the apartment complex are walking around there and they're seeing this guy put this real gun in the flower pot and cover it back up with the dirt. And I guess his idea was if somebody was going to ambush him, they'd come in one door, he'd go out the other and be able to get himself a hand on a gun. Well, the kids saw that, so this guy goes back inside, and a few minutes later we get a call from an elderly gentleman in the apartment complex that there's a kid walking around outside with an automatic weapon in his hand. And so we respond out there, and sure enough, the kid had seen what was going on, so he dug it up and had the 36 clip automatic weapon in his hand. Fortunately, he didn't know how to turn it on, so it was still locked. So we used that as a reason to ask this gentleman to leave. He left almost immediately. Then in another situation we had, in a subdivision right across the street from one of our apartment complexes, we had 3 guys visiting some gal at the apartment complex one night, and they decided that they needed to go on a shopping spree, but they didn't have any money. So they proceeded to go across the street into my subdivision, and they started trying all the windows of all the houses that they could find to see if they could get a window open. Well, they tried, we think, about 30 windows before they finally found one, and they opened it up, and it was a bedroom of a 16-year-old girl who was in her bed asleep. Well, fortunately, she did not wake up. These 2 gentlemen crawled through her window, got inside. They looked at her, thank goodness, didn't do anything, walked down the hall, and they got to Dad's bedroom, and he had his wallet laying on his dresser. So they grabbed the wallet, went back out the window, and they had the girl that they were visiting. She had 3 little kids, and they had them in the car in the middle of the night. And so they take these 3 kids, and they go down to the Walmart store in Aurora and decide they're going to buy themselves an Xbox and 10 cartons of cigarettes and a bunch of other stuff. So they go and they whip out this guy's credit card, and they use it. So fortunately, the gentleman who had just had his credit card, he wakes up and the window was open or something. So he gets up and he said, "My wallet's missing." So right away, the 911's us. So we get down there, and so he had his credit card number, so we have the ability through some other stuff that we got involved in, we could dial up on our inside our squad car, stolen credit card numbers and have they ever been used? Well, we put this one in and instantly it came back and said it was just used in Aurora for $1,400. So we get the Aurora police and they go to the Walmart with us at 4:30 in the morning and they say, well, we got a camera here. We photographed this. So they get the camera and we look at these two guys buying this stuff. So then he said, well, let's go outside. They had to be in the parking lot. So we get outside and here's the girlfriend with the 3 little kids sitting in the car out by the front door. And here's her license plate. So we were able to trace that immediately back to the apartment where they had returned to with the stolen goods. And so Aurora came with us because, of course, it was their problem, too, because the crime had been committed in their town. So we go in there, and here they had all the stuff on the table. They were opening it up and playing with it and everything else. So needless to say, they left in about 2 days. And then I could go on with that, but we've had some situations, and we emphasize that this crime-free housing is not to be abused. But when you get some character that does the types of things that I'm describing to you, it works. I mean, we've had very good success with it. We've been able to really take down some bad people. So I'm a big promoter of it. So then, as we got into home rule, we had the ability then for the city council to enact another half-cent sales tax to our ledger. So the council voted unanimously to do it. So right now we have a 2-cent sales tax for the city of Batavia, and one of it is the state one that you get automatically. You get the 1%, and with the earlier referendum and the other half-cent that we now have a second set, and then we have a 75 or 3/4 of a penny to go to the RTA for the RTA's business, and then there's Kane County has a 25 quarter-cent sales tax on everything in Kane County, so that's another cent. So in Batavia right now, if you pay sales tax, you're paying 8%. Well, one thing we found is that many of the purchases that are paying the 8% are not people from Batavia. They're people out in our Randall Road corridor where we have our own 1.5 million square feet of retail. We have a big restaurant industry in Batavia because of the presence of Fermilab. So we get a lot of activity from that. So it has really worked very beneficially. So right now, my budget for this particular year is $31,356,448 in our what we call our general fund, which is the only one that we work off of property tax with. We have some other funds, but we own our own electric utility, we have our own water, we have our own sewer, we have different fees for that pays the bills for that, so none of that's on the property tax. But of that number, as I said, 8,733,000 is estimated to be, or 35,000 is estimated to be our sales tax for the year, and then 7,547,000 is our property tax. And then we have other municipal fees and other intergovernmental fees, the state income tax and whatever. So we're able to cover that, and we were able to keep our tax rate at the same level we had it last year because we had enough new construction that we were able to figure out that our assessed valuation would be going up, and that would be the increase we were putting out would absorb it, so we would hold our tax rate at the same amount of money. So I have nothing good to say about it. I mean, nothing but good to say about it because it has worked very well for us. When we started the whole home rule idea, we had a police department of, I believe it was 28. Now we have 42, and I can afford to pay for those because we have this revenue coming in. We had a fire department of 16, and now I have 24. And I have various employee groups within my fire department. I have 24 that are card-carrying union members, and then we have the private contractor running the ambulance, and then we have a paid-on-call section, which there's a lot of young people who want to be firemen, and they're trying to get some experience. So if you come and get to be a paid-on-call, you get your firefighter certification. So when you go test for full-time jobs, it's easier. You probably go up higher up the list because you've already got the training. So we're finding that to be to our benefit. So we've just had a very good run with this, and I'm certainly would, it's not my business over here to tell you what to do, but I would just tell you in Batavia, it has worked our benefit. So does anybody have any questions or comments you'd like to fire at me?
I do. Just curious, with all your years of experience, are there what disadvantages have you experienced because of home rule? None?
I'm hard pressed, I'm sorry, I should bring the mic with me here. I'm hard pressed to think of anything that's there. I mean, I've had people tell me, well, gee, 8% seems like it's a high sales tax, but if you start going to a lot of towns, they're all at that rate now. And, the one that's been kind of a problem for us has been the whole Amazon phenomena where they weren't paying sales tax at all for a while. Now, supposedly, they've just, March 1st, they're supposed to start paying the city's share of the sales tax. So we're waiting. We have been very conservative in our estimates of how much that's going to mean to us, but we think that'll be another nice piece of change coming in because you are now able to employ your local sales tax to Amazon, and that gets recorded, and they supposedly charge the sales tax to the address that the item is being delivered to. So in other words, the town where it's being sent out of doesn't get the money, it comes to the town where it's been purchased. Yes, sir.
What was the margin of yes votes over no votes when you proposed this?
Well, with the first time we didn't have to have it came automatically in 2010 because we went over 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2 years ago, we had some people in town say, well, we don't think this is right. We think we ought to repeal home rule. So they came in and got 1,200 signatures on a petition. I didn't argue with it. I said, okay, let's put it out for a vote. And so we went forward and, I apologize for the mic people. We went forward and we could not spend. We were advised right quick up that we couldn't use any public money to buy any signs or literature or anything else telling people this is what you should be doing. We did get an opinion, I believe, from the Illinois Attorney General that we could put out just information, but we couldn't swing it either way. It had to be just steady information that was what it was. So we did a little of that, but then, certainly myself and the members of the city council as private citizens could go out and talk to people and whatever have you. So we went to the referendum, and the referendum, I don't know if I did write that down here. The referendum went, and it was, they had proposed, the people who did the question proposed it so that you would vote yes to get rid of home rule. So we had to try to encourage everybody to vote no. And that's sometimes hard for people to understand because many people have an inclination to want to be for something, so they're voting yes. But to defeat this, you had to vote no. And so when we went to referendum, the vote was roughly 9,330 no votes to 3,014 yes votes. So we defeated it 72%.
Okay.
But it is possible they thought they were voting against home rule when they voted.
We didn't set the question. I'll give you that. You can't dump that one on me because we didn't write the question. The people that opposed it wrote the question about should we get rid of home rule, and they thought everybody would vote yes, and 72% of the world voted no. So that's just the way it fleshed out.
When was that?
2 years ago.
And how things been going since then in terms of liking or disliking?
No, I haven't had a word about it since then, quite honestly.
What's the biggest complaint you've gotten about the use of power? Like, what's the biggest abuse of power that people complain about it, if there is one?
I don't know if I've really heard much. It's kind of taken for granted that it's the government and we're funding it. What I can say if somebody says, why are you doing this? I'm going to say, well, look at your property tax bill. Yours is one of the lowest in the Chicagoland region because of our ability to keep all this need for money off your property taxes. Now it's being paid through sales tax, which is everybody visiting the gas station, driving through town, or going to the restaurant, and they live in Elgin or Aurora or Westchester or wherever. So we're thinking that we have not had a lot of negativism about it. Yes, sir. Or ma'am.
One of the statements that was made was that on a $250,000 house, your property tax would be $2,000 more than the property tax in Westchester. I know people who live in Batavia, and you don't have the small lots that we do.
That's probably correct. I agree with you that. I would tell you the other thing there is, we do not have low property taxes. The city share is low. Ours could maybe drive that bill much higher if I had all this money that I'm talking about put onto the property tax. Where our people get hit real bad is our school district. Now, arguably, our school district tests real high. We've been the state football champion 2 years in the last 5 years. We keep getting beat the last 2 years by Nazarene over here in the semifinals to go to the state tournament. But we got a lot of people that see me want to move into Batavia because they want to be near that school district and what it's charging. So that's why the bill is as high as it is. So, but I will tell you, my city is not doing anything to drive that property tax bill up. It's the school district, park district. They're the ones that have the big tax bills and not the city. So.
Let me ask the question a different way.
Okay.
Okay, do you think that your property tax is higher because your lots are bigger?
I don't know if I would think that they are because you have to appreciate, as I say, we're one of the oldest towns in the whole region. And so in our older parts of our community, most of the houses are well over 100 years of age. And many of those houses were built on smaller lots. Now what's happened is that we're finding out that many of those houses, when they were built in the 1870s or 80s or whenever, they were built by Scandinavians who came over here from Sweden and Norway, and they knew how to build things. So these houses are well built. So today, the house is still in pretty good shape, and they have become a very attractive target for young couples who are newly married who want to get themselves and their children into the Batavia school system. So as a result of that, I would tell you, driving around Westchester, I've done it several times, I think our lot sizes, and there's some that certainly are much bigger, but we have a great number of them that are probably about the same size. And that's in the older parts of town. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned right at the beginning of your introduction that you were in some meetings to distribute federal funds.
Mm-hmm.
Batavia has some federal highways and some state highways that go through, and then you've got your own streets. Does going to home rule change the way that the U.S. or the state helps you fund road repairs?
No. Doesn't come, as far as I can tell you, and I guess I'm the guy that's sitting at the table, that doesn't really play a factor into it. The money that's distributed to the local communities through Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning goes to 12 sub-regional councils, and Westchester's in what they call West Central. You're with all the towns around you here. And you get some money, multi-millions of dollars every year goes to that council. And that council takes that money over, and then they make the decision who's going to get the money. And most of them have a ranking and a rating, and so one town applies for something to resurface a street, and they have to wait 2 or 3 years, but if it meets all the criteria, they'll get the money. So that's how that works, but there's no delineation that gives it more or less because of home rule. That's never been part of any conversation that I'm aware of. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned a couple of things. One, Batavia is split DuPage County, Kane County, correct?
Well, I only have 13 acres in DuPage County, and that's all retention pond.
Okay.
So I don't have
and the
anybody
rest of
living
it
there.
is in Kane, correct?
Right, it's all in King.
Okay, so that's a different tax structure there. And then you mentioned that commercial development, that there's a lot of commercial development, and that also there's a lot of new development, new housing development. So all of those things are what is new EAV, right?
Right.
Equal
Right.
assessed value. So by Westchester being a built-out community,
Right.
and it not really having the opportunity to capture that EAV, except for places that are like Village Hall here, which is on 0 EAV at this point. It was redeveloped, but so each year you're capturing how much EAV with all of the new development and with all of the commercial development that you have.
It goes up.
So for every time time you have a new commercial development, a new senior center, or senior housing, or you have new housing development, you get to apply that 73 cents to that. And then you get to apply the sales tax to that new commercial retail development as well. So that's all new dollars that are coming to the community purely because you aren't landlocked like most towns, like Westchester.
I'm landlocked now, I mean.
Well, right, but those are all, you have that new EAV, correct?
Right, correct. One thing I will tell you though, that we do, and I don't know what Westchester does, when you're gonna build something new in my town, number one, you buy a building permit, which they tell me we're not cheap in doing that. But one thing, if you're building a new structure, a new house, or a new building of some type, if it's a new building, we charge you 3 cents a square foot to a special fund that goes only to buy new fire equipment. And we also charge you another 3 cents to another fund that goes only to buy new public works vehicles, tractors, whatever. And then on the house side, if you build a new house, we charge you $1,250 at time of building permit. That money goes to the fire department fund. And then we charge $1,250 to the public works fund. So right now, in the last 20 years, I have not had to go to the property tax for 1 cent to buy any new fire truck, ambulance, or snowplow, or end loader, or dump truck, or anything, because we got enough money in the fund. And I just looked at the fund the other day. We're buying a $700,000 fire truck this year, and I've got about $1.6 million in the fund sitting there waiting and drawing interest while it waits. So we're pretty well set, but we have those fees that we charge. So if you want to come into Batavia, you're going to pay for it. But we feel that it's a good investment. The other thing that we did do, I should cover this too, we created an adjudication court. So if you got a rundown piece of property, or you got junk cars in your yard, or whatever have you, we go over and knock on your door and ask you to get rid of it, and you don't do it within 3 or 4 weeks, we come over and serve you with a summons, and then you have to come down on a Wednesday night to our council chambers and sit there with the rest of your neighbors, and we bring in a judge, and he sits there and makes determinations about when you're gonna pay it and how much you're gonna pay and the whole bit. And as a result of that, our property maintenance is pretty good. I got one house in town right now that's a problem, and we got so dismayed by it that we filed it went into foreclosure, and we're buying the foreclosure to get the house to be able to tear it down and turn it into something, because the rest of the neighborhood is really suffering because this one piece of property is not in good shape. Yes, sir.
I had a couple quick questions. So,
Sure.
did you have to establish, or did you establish a TIF to develop the retail?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
some of it. Now, down in our older part of our downtown, we did tips. Out on the Randall Road corridor, I haven't done tips.
You haven't done any TIFs. And so what was the connection then? I'm sorry if you're repeating yourself, but what's the connection then between developing that retail and home rule?
Probably nothing other than we had the space. It was on this main corridor through Kane County called Randall Road.
Right, I understand.
And we were able to, we had all the retailers, and when we did it, I had Jewel and Ace Hardware sitting on my doorstep saying, well, if you go out there and do this, get this zoning, we'll build a new Jewel in Batavia, we'll build an Ace Hardware, we'll build whatever. So then after they did that, then came Target. We were one of the first to have the Target store. Then we got Menards, then we got Walmart, then we got Kohl's. So we've got a nice, that's where all
They were
this.
attracted to moving into Batavia.
Right, and they were, and
Were
a
attracted.
couple of reasons. Number one, this corridor was all being developed, and it was 3 towns, they're right there together. And then on the other side of it is some pretty affluent neighborhoods where there's a lot of disposable income. So these retailers, as you well know, want to go where there's money, people have money in their pocket to spend.
I think that's one of the areas where we're gonna see a difference with residents as far as Batavia.
Right, well, I'm not arguing
But
that
then
there isn't.
The other comment I had just real quick was that I've done business in Orland Park. I do house renovations, and I had to sit through one of the house renovations got red tagged for not having a permit for something very minor. It was remodeling work, but I had to sit through adjudication court for almost an hour and a half one day and listen to some of the things that go on in adjudication court. And while it might be a revenue stream for towns, I think it's a huge waste of taxpayer money, because the things that were going on in the adjudication court were just silly. And I think that if a town were able to say, these things need to be worked out among neighbors, and that we maybe have a little bit less involvement, maybe it wouldn't look like such a revenue stream, you know what I mean? Because it was very clear that Orland Park, which is a home rule community,
You know what?
I didn't know that before. I'm putting the pieces together that they were a home rule community now, and
They are.
it's just kind of one of those things that it was
I
kind of
would-
frustrating as a.
I would just respond to you that, number one, I don't use it, I don't even know if we levy a fine in our adjudication court. We just ask you, do this, if you don't do it, we're gonna file a lien against your property and do it ourselves. I mean, that may be the other way we're gonna do this. But we don't use this as a revenue stream. We're there just to maintain the maintenance of the house or the property. Some of it's commercial where somebody starts to repair cars, and next thing I know, they got 35 cars disassembled, laying all over the front yard and looking like I don't know what. So we have to get after that, and you have to have some sense of pride in your community and some desire to be wanting to keep the standards up to what everybody else in the community wants to see the town look like. Yes.
In the absence of home rule in Batavia, what would that mean to the, pocketbook of the average homeowner?
I don't, what it would mean, they would, they're going to be paying a penny less on sales tax. I don't know what that would mean on the individuals, but it probably wouldn't, we'd probably have to raise some of the property tax then, because we wouldn't have the revenue stream to cover some of the things that we're now paying for, like the policemen and the firemen. I'm talking about the personnel, and of course, one of the things that's kind of a strenuous thing for every city in the state now is the pension system. And they have done some stuff recently to try to corral some of that, and I subscribe to what they've done so far. But there is, I don't think it would have that much of a difference on the, certainly wouldn't, hit a lot of people very bad, except probably their property tax would be another, however high I could raise it, and there's restrictions on how much you can take it in a year before they tell you no more and you gotta start cutting things. So, and I've never had to play that game. We've always tried to keep ours around the 75-cent range, and so that we can allow, because I know these other governments that are out there with me, they're pretty high, as it's already been pointed out, and I have to kind of opt for that in how the city does its business, so.
Do you have any idea what Batavia's bond rating is?
It's one of the, very high, I forget we're probably, I don't know what the terminology of that is. I wish I'd known you were gonna ask me that, but I am very proud of our bond rating, I can say that. Yes,
So I know the difference in the beginning when you guys developed Wrangell Road, and I've driven that corridor for work every day. And I see all of that, granted that it's a difference from Westchester, but again, from what I'm hearing, that you've been able to put additional taxes on that have helped the town, and it only helps the town, like we're talking about for fire and for police.
Right.
So while you would have had the additional sales revenue, you have more that is directed to the town because of home rule that you didn't. My other question is, you mentioned some of the other things that you're talking about that have nothing to do with taxes or fees.
Right.
You're talking about the crime.
crime-free housing.
Right, things like that. So what would you say in effect you've seen in the town in home rule that you've been able to do in your town that you would not be able to do if you weren't home rule, that has helped the town as far as ordinance, safety, blight, you're talking about keeping the community looking, to help all of our tax dollars instead of our home values? What would you say you've been able to do for the town that has nothing to do with the cash, but is a benefit to the residents because of the policies you do?
Number one would be that crime-free housing thing. I mean, I've been able to take some bad actors out of my town. And, in 5 days' notice and they're gone. And so we don't do that very often, but if you go out, and I can tell you some more horror stories about it than I told you a couple. I mean, we've had it happen, and we've been able to respond to each and every one of them and get the bad guy out of there. The other thing, the adjudication, which we just talked about, that seems to fall under the home rule reign, and so those are probably the two tools that I feel that we're using to try to help control the, what home rule does for you. Plus, obviously, I'm in it for the revenue that I get from the sales tax, because, the one thing I would tell you is, we've got most of the major retailers in America, on the stretch between Main Street in Batavia and Main Street in St. Charles out there, it's over 5 million square feet. And, you know, all of them are telling us they wanna be there, you know, and they never seem to bring up how much sales tax is, they just wanna be in that area where, cause that's where all the traffic is coming, and there's 60,000 cars a day now running up and down that road, stopping into their stores. We just, 2 weeks ago, we just had the opening of a Raising Cane chicken restaurant. I don't know if you're familiar with that. My goodness gracious, they had 377 people at the grand opening at 9 o'clock in the morning. And, so the place was, they hired the Illinois State Police to come in on a special detail to deal with the traffic that they knew they were gonna generate. Last week I was going to a meeting in Chicago, and the mayor, Glenn Ellen, got on the train with me. And so because the next Raising Cane to be built is in Glen Ellen, and it's under construction. She says, what do I bought? I said, well, you should have been with me last month, Friday morning, when I cut the ribbon. I said, had 377 people. And she says, oh my goodness gracious, and hers is over here on Roosevelt Road, just down the street here. So if you're interested in it, you should take a ride over, because it's quite a, but I mean, that's why things like that are what's appearing on my street out there, and they'll be adding to my sales tax volume over there next month, I'm pretty sure. Yes,
You said, you referenced the non-home rule sales tax?
yes.
You did that obviously before you were home rule.
That first half cent was done before I was home rule. The second half cent we had just adopted because we could then, because we were home rule.
So what, I mean, Westchester can consider that too, obviously, but they're not home rule.
I guess, yeah, I suppose.
They can raise their tax either way.
Well, I don't wanna get into Westchester, but.
Well, that's by referendum.
Right, you have to do
The
it.
village already has a non-home rule sales tax that has to go into our capital fund. If we're a home rule, that could go into our general fund.
You're right, because when we did the half cent that I talked about, we specifically said the money would be used to build the 2 fire stations, pay the bonds over a 20-year period, and never let it go to taxes, which we've been able to do.
Can you explain the difference between capital and general? Like,
So the general fund is, obviously the operating fund, that is, where we pay all your salaries for police, fire, public works, administration. Capital fund is for any larger expenditures, such as doing the roads, doing the police department, fire department, that type of, structure, that type of expenditure.
I have another question.
Yes, you in the way in the back.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
First of all, I appreciate you being here on Sunday afternoon. I covered Batavia in transportation for over 40-some years.
Okay.
Geneva, St. Charles, the whole suburbs out there. I really want to thank Batavia for helping one of my clients, Casapa Corporation out of Fargo, Italy. They've been in that building now for almost 20 years out of Batavia, right down to Torres Gulf.
Right.
But, the thing is, you're Batavia, you've got 26,000 people. This is Westchester, in the last count, as far as the statistics, 16,000, maybe 200, and more moving out than coming in. How do you think home rule will work in Westchester with only 16,000 people? I'm not sure all voters. And the other side of it is, we have a village clerk who's supposed to get information out to the residents that are not on social media. And in turn with that, 64% of the people are above 65 years of age. And I'm sure everybody here is on social media. I thought this room would be packed today. And it's very disappointing, because this is a very important step for our town. And if it's important to you, you gotta be there. Where's our village clerk? Where's our president who should compliment you being here addressing our town? I don't understand that. You know, I'm trying to comprehend. But the thing is, you're appreciated being here today.
Thank you.
And I don't know how you're gonna do it with 16,000 less people. You know, where are you gonna get the taxes from? You know, this different things.
Well, I assume the best thing they can do would be to put a sales tax on there. I don't know what the sales tax in the neighboring towns are. I assume some of them are probably at 8%, I think. One other thing I should mention, that we also were able to put a 2-cent tax on liquor sales. So we get, that's another extra thing, that on liquor sales, you're paying us 4%. So.
Well, on page 6 of the handout, at the top, there's a list of items that, that the village is looking at, implementing, or ways that that money would go into our general fund. And it totals to about $1.5 million every year. And this is sustainable revenue. This isn't a one-time shot. So that's what the village is looking at. And that money would allow us to do a better job with our road program, with our capital projects program. And obviously the bond rating is a big deal as well. Money's very cheap now. We'd be able to go out if we had to for a larger issue of some bonds to handle some of the capital projects.
I do appreciate your stance on cannabis as well.
I didn't bring that up. I'm a bad guy in the eyes of a lot of people. Yes.
I got a question for Paul. Paul, do you have any idea what our long-term debt was 5 years ago compared to now?
It's all alternative revenue source bonds.
Pardon?
They're all alternative revenue source bonds, which means that, we haven't gone to property taxes for bonding and for issuing debt. As far as the total, I would have to look that up and get back to you. I'm not sure.
What about your debt situation? How does it differ in the amount of debt you feel like you carry as non-home rule, and then the growth of your town, and, you know, obviously there's growth, there's debt.
In response to the question the gentleman asked me, our bond rating is very high. I mean, and it's reflective of, you know, our ability to pay versus how much money we got out on the street for the crime. So I would tell you I'm in really good shape with that whole thing. I mean, we had to do some stuff, but we had to take radium out of our water at one point in time. That was back in the early 80s, and that cost us $26 million. But we were able to bond on it, and then with the increasing number of people using our water system, see, we don't put that on the property tax bill. That's all paid for by the users. And we also own our own electric utility, which is another whole story. There's 5 towns in the region: Naperville, Batavia, Geneva, St. Charles, and Wilmette, that are the 5 that own their own electric utilities. And this goes way back into what, you know, back before Commonwealth Edison had money to go out to some of the rest of us when they were setting themselves up in Chicago. And we just held on to the utilities. So we have revenue coming in for that, and we pay for all of our electric with that money. So we try to, like the water, sewer, and electric, we're paying for that totally separate from the property tax. Yes, ma'am.
Question in regards to, I'm not sure, Kane County, any of the, commercial businesses that you attracted or industrial businesses, do any of them receive any type of, tax incentive in order to come to, Batavia?
Well, it's some of the
And then your tip fund, I mean.
Yeah, well, the tips we only use in the downtown. And some of that's because the buildings are well over 100 years of age and they need to be remodeled or upgraded or brought to code or whatever. So we've done some of that, but most of the tip money we've spent in our downtown is for public improvements, like the new streets, new sidewalks, new curb and gutter, new utility installations that then service those businesses, but then their taxes help pay for those improvements over a 15-year period or whatever our bond is on that one. So we have several of those, but we don't use tips to be subsidizing businesses. Thank you. No. And we don't use it in the industrial park at all, basically. They're there because they want to be there.
What about Kane County? Do they have any type of, tax abatement? Well, I know, like, they have an enterprise, well.
They have an enterprise
Yeah,
fund.
they have an enterprise zone, and do they do their tax abatement through the zone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had in town about 2 years ago, we had a vicious dog, and people were very upset about that, but if we were home rule at that time, we wouldn't have had to go back to county standards of, you know, they have to attack this one, and they have to attack another one for it to be put down. Have you experienced any of that since you've been home rule?
I've not had anything home rule to deal with animals. Probably have more dogs in town right now than I've ever had in the history. Everybody seems to have one. And it's not been a problem. I mean, I think it's a recognized community thing of being that you have a dog, you patrol it. If you take your dog for a walk, you take a little plastic bag with you, and if the dog discharges himself, you clean up the mess before you continue on down the street.
Our situation here was a dog was bit somebody, killed a dog, and then killed another animal a year later. Because they pretty much, and they were told to keep it indoors, but that didn't happen. So I know a lot of people were like, well, if we had home rule, we could have gotten the dog out of town. with the person who's been.
I've never heard of home rule applied to a dog, but maybe you could do something. Yes.
In your overall experience and knowledge, what's the overall satisfaction level as far as you know out of the, what you say, 250 communities?
There's 284 in the 7-county area.
Okay, that have home rule.
I think those that have it are pleased to have it and try and utilize it, and if they abuse it, I think you'd be reading about it in the paper pretty heavily. I don't think you'd get a whole bunch of people screaming and hollering, you know, as long as you're using it for what you're saying you're doing, and you're putting police and firemen on the street and things like that, you know, I've never had any scandal in my administration in 40 years, knock on wood, and I don't intend to, but, there are people that do go out and get elected to office and do some shenanigans, and then you watch them on channel, I watched them on Commander Fired Up this morning, you know, that's out there, so, yes.
I'm just curious what Westchester would plan to do being home rule. Like, are we expected to see, new stores pop up, or, you know, what is Westchester's plan?
So that is part of the whole idea with the TIF studies, and again, on page 6, the revenues indicated on page 6 don't even include any redevelopment, which we're anticipating redeveloping, obviously, this Roosevelt Road Corridor in the St. Joe's area. The Roosevelt Road Corridor mainly for retail operations, but these projections don't include any of those sales tax dollars.
Roosevelt Road doing what? Where the homes are?
No, the TIF district that we're proposing, that has been out there for about 5 months now, from Manheim all the way to Gardner.
That's a piece. Okay. But we don't, you know, this revenue shows hotel, motel tax, all that.
Right.
What do we have in hotel, motel tax?
About $200,000 a
No,
year.
but one hotel?
About $200,000 a year, one hotel.
We just had to work out for one.
So if you would add another one, you'd be looking at another $200,000 a year. And again, that money right now can't be used in the general fund because we're not home rule. Does that make sense, or you don't?
You know, I just don't envision this becoming an area where we're gonna have all this
People say they
grand.
wanna come to Westchester.
You know, I mean, we have a Target right here already, we have one in Broadview, okay, I don't know that we need a Target. I just don't know where they would put this, what they plan.
Well, so you know, those 3 buildings are coming
I
down.
would feel better if I felt more informed
Okay.
as to what Westchester wants to do. You know,
Well, I
I
just
appreciate
explained some of it.
his time to explain what Batavia has done, but I would much more appreciate it if there was somebody here from Westchester that would say, this is what we propose to do, this is what we would like to do, this is how we would handle it.
Well, I'm here from
And I don't feel
Westchester.
educated enough to say what your proposals are.
Okay.
All their village managers with Westchester, so he can answer any question as far as, he kind of did already with some of it, but.
Yeah. So, Mr. Millsack, as far as like what Westchester is going to do, like for instance, we are pretty much a built community. There is opportunity for development if you know, if Village Hall was to take that on. And I think that you guys are doing a great job by, you know, doing the TIF studies and finally looking at doing a TIF on zero EAD in the areas that you're planning on doing it. I feel like that TIF, if we do that TIF study and we plan accordingly, that we'll be able to realize some infrastructure improvements from that TIF alone. Why not wait and, you know, see how the TIF plays out so that your residents can see the development that's coming from that and build on your infrastructure from that. And then, you know, and then you can ask the question. Then you have, you know, then you have a lot of your residents, you know, questions answered. Okay, what is the plan? Oh, we see new development. Oh, the village did a TIF. you know, we're attracting, industry, you know, and things like that. The other thing is that you've given tax incentives to big businesses, to the small industrial, places that we have here. You've given tax incentives. When you give them a tax incentive, that savings gets blanketed across all of the residents. We pay what they say. So when Mariano's came in, there was a sales tax share. Okay, when does that sales tax end? You know, where we're sharing the revenue
3 years.
in 3 years. So this board has to, you know, they're gonna hear that in 3 years. Are they gonna renew that? So you're talking about a home rule
No, there's
referendum.
no plan to renew that.
But on the other hand, you have a sales tax and you have, you have big companies or you have industry that is paying a reduced share from the Cook County, tax incentives. You know, so those are things that can be put in place. When you tip, why not tip more the north end so that you can get some of those alleys fixed? Why haven't we seen any grants? You know, there's grants for green alleys. There, you know, and I never see Westchester, receiving a grant to do this, receiving a grant to do that. You know, there's
Well,
all
I'd like
types
to
of
point you
laws.
to our budget and our financial statements, because we do receive grants every year. So maybe they're being overlooked, but they are in there and we do receive them. We also employ, we have a contracted grant writer, and so we're going after more grants every year. Okay, as far as the TIF district and putting that out there first, this development, was talked about for probably 10 years before I got here. Since I got here, we've implemented it, and it's still gonna take another 3 to 5 years before you see some development coming in. So do we need to wait until we can't do these streets? We're having issues now getting the streets done. So, yes. So, and this is all stuff that if you keep delaying it, it's never gonna happen. You know, sometimes indecision is the worst decision. And that's what's been happening in Westchester, probably since I've been out of high school and back in '86.
So what about the new development, like for instance, you know, Batavia, yes, there was a lot of opportunity.
We have
for
probably
new
50
development.
acres, we have probably 50 acres to develop.
Exactly, and that's
But
what
that's
I'm
what
saying.
we're trying to do.
Why don't we take up again the prairie where we have the whole thing planned out, you know, where we can have new development, new homes.
We also have another possible development of apartment complexes with over 216 units that we're talking about.
Exactly, on Hickory Lane.
Right, so all this stuff is happening, so I don't understand.
So that's new EAD.
Right. Plus the 30 acres at St. Joe's. So, I mean, the stuff is going on, so to say it's not, I don't understand.
You know, one thing I'm hearing, and I do understand, you know, that we do have some other sources of revenue. You know, the one thing of all these things that are gonna contribute is that the added sales tax on, if we were to do home rule, would be not only in addition to that, but it would be on already existing businesses, which at this point, we can't go any higher. So, yeah, developing it, I'm all excited for this. This is good, this is gonna help us, this is gonna help us financially. But it doesn't mean that we can increase anything on gaming. It doesn't mean we can increase anything on liquor. It doesn't mean we can make up our own rules for animals, for crime, for blight.
Now, you can do 2 cents on liquor.
Or based on, I don't know what we have, or if we've got that yet. I'm just kind of like looking at it is I'm just happy we're doing something on both ends. That we're looking at the tip, we're looking at development, and we're also looking at doing things that are gonna benefit us now, that we can do. I'm personally not comfortable with having a lot of our hands tied by Cook County. Because we all know what, you know, when Cook County makes up this stuff, they're not thinking of Westchester. We know that. Huh. You know, they're looking at the bigger towns and what is the biggest town. I don't think in Cook County they know what's best for Westchester. I think we as residents know what's best for Westchester. And that's, you know, nobody wants, I don't wanna pay more on my tax bill, I don't wanna pay more anything, but I like the idea that being able to add some sales tax is, I mean, you're talking about, you know, Rail Road.
You don't even wanna know how much of my sales tax dollars are on your Rainbow Road.
Appreciate that.
There are a lot of my sales tax dollars on your Rainbow Road. So I don't live there. So I like the idea of people, we're developing the areas, and now we're gonna get people, our gas stations even, that's right now, that's not waiting for the apartments, that's not waiting for TIF, that's not waiting for development. That can be done now, and people coming up Manhattan, going to the expressway, picking up gas, people going out Roosevelt Road, picking up gas, that's dollars now. So, I kind of almost see it as two separate things, two very needed things, but, I just wanna see us move forward and develop.
One thing which I find really disturbing, as I'm sure other Westchester residents do, is to why there isn't a lot more information in the Westchester newspaper about all this stuff we're talking about. Why? Why isn't it there?
It'll be out there Monday.
Yeah, but why hasn't it been out there? I don't care about today, I'm talking about the past, on a regular basis. Why isn't that happening? That's not a rhetorical question.
We will do a better job to get more information out.
Well, what's the problem? What's the hang up with that?
What other sort of information would you like?
The stuff we're talking about now,
Okay.
the tip that's coming up,
That was in the
why
paper.
hasn't that been in the paper? This is not a recent situation. So what's the hang up with getting that in there?
It seems to me that I have not been seeing the reports on, the, what do you call it, the building, the branch pickup and all that kind of stuff that, Public Works.
Well, that's
Seems to
always
me I
there.
haven't been, it seems to me it was there for a while and lately it's not.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm
Well,
talking about significant.
I'm adding on to your point. It
Yeah.
does seem like the village paper has been slacking a little bit.
It's slacking a lot. I mean, that's their only connection to the village. And like it's pointed out, many of the people in the village don't have computers to access that information. So who's holding that up?
I don't know what to tell you, except we'll do a better job on it if there's information that hasn't
Well,
been.
who is responsible for the information?
I am,
Are you?
yes.
Well, boy, I hope you get on your horse.
You talk about the computer, I got all these senior living communities in my town. And I try every year to go at least once a year and meet with all of them. My first name is Jeff, and I tell them all, don't call me mayor, I don't like titles, just call me Jeff.
Yeah.
So they like that. So I go in and right away, I give a little program and then they start. And the last 3 years that I've done this, and I have 5 to go to, what you've just been saying, I hear in my town, that number one, the newspaper doesn't cover it anymore. And then they say, well, go to social media or go to the computer and read it. And then the ladies will say, well, Jeff, you realize I graduated from high school before 1970, and I never saw a computer in any school
Yeah.
classroom I was ever in.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm totally lost. I
Right.
can't use a computer.
Right.
I'm part of the lost generation. And so between that and this last year, we got into this whole big thing about what's available on cable TV, and why can't I buy a paper TV guide anymore? And what's going to happen? Am I going to be able to watch the Chicago Cubs on TV this year? And that's a real open-ended question that, in some instances in my town, hasn't been resolved yet because Mr. Rickards wants to charge $75 a year to get to his channel, and then he wants the cable companies to prorate it over a $6.25 a month charge. And then the cable people are saying, well, there's baseball's in business for 7 months, and then there's 5 months that there's no baseball, so you want me to send them a bill for $6.25 and they're not getting nothing.
Right.
So, I mean, that's all stuff totally beyond the city administrator and myself, but those are the types of stuff that really gets under the skin of people. And you're no different than all these people I get in my town that are really upset about this kind of problem we got going here with technology, where there's a lost generation of people that are out there that don't have any ability to dial any of this stuff up.
And even if you do, they change it.
Right.
Every year.
So I guess my message is don't blame the government on that one, because we don't have any control over what they do.
I think if I could just comment too, like I started a podcast for Westchester, but the intention for it was supposed to be back in October before any of this even came to light. And then I realized that home rule was coming to light, and you would be surprised, like to your point, 200 people maybe talk about this stuff on Facebook or on social media. Maybe. And how many of those are seeing stuff and are willing to comment? Maybe there's a little bit of loss there. And then you have the newsletter. So on one hand, over the course of the interviews and the things that I've done to try to get information, gather information through actual conversation with these people, I've sat down with Paul, I've sat down with all the trustees almost, and in having actual conversations with these people, you get to know their character more. You try to give them the benefit of the doubt so that they can actually say what they need to say. And my intention was to give them a voice as well as give the residents a voice so that I could ask all the stupid questions as well as the intelligent questions. But I can see both sides. It's frustrating to try to put out information that maybe they haven't been able to because of bandwidth, just sheer. I mean, I came to the board meeting. This has been the most interesting social experiment I've ever been involved in because I came to the board meeting and there's 2 board members missing. And then that happens regularly because we all have lives. So I think that unfortunately we're talking about something that's societal. If you want to affect change, you have to speak up. The only reason he even knows that this is a big deal or at all, I think, is because I brought it up sitting in his house because this is my father-in-law. So we can't just sit around and say, well, most people are older and they don't know about it. Well, then knock on a door. Say hello to your neighbor. Tell him that his weeds are too high or work it out with him. We want to fight too much. We want to stand on one side of the aisle and say, you're the bad guy, you did it wrong. And I think that that's what I'm trying to implement as a way for us to have something, anything, that we can stop doing that, have conversation, and come to the table. And some of my frustration is just seeing that I get it that there's not enough people involved in this issue. What, 25 of us in this room? I mean, we're a town of 16,000, and probably 6,000, if we're lucky, are going to vote on this. So, who am I reaching? And so don't feel like the paper or social media or any one thing is ever going to get through to people that just don't want to pay attention. If they don't want to pay attention or they just want to hear what somebody else has to say and then decide, that's how it's going to be. I mean, it's the same way with national politics. A lot of people say, why didn't you put this in November? Well, because you're already amped up because of national politics, and you're going to go one way or the other based on what anyone's telling you or whatever misinformation is out there. So this is not an easy thing. And I hate to see everybody get, people that care that are here get too excited about one way or the other because it's just, I think we should be doing more advocacy in the community and getting people just to understand the issue. And yeah, if that means a flyer, you could put out a flyer for $2,500 to every house, but who wants to pay for that? I've already asked on my podcast if we could get together and try to do that. There's something coming out in the March paper about a podcast that I've done where I've talked to all these people. So it's just, I feel the frustration of not being able to reach out to a community and say, and I put up a video of Lyle. They did it very well. They put out 4 flyers. They put it in every paper, every newsletter of theirs. If you watch the Lyle video, they petitioned for home rule. And they probably did things they shouldn't have done based on what you were saying. But they still got shot down. So, but all I would want to see is more voters, more informed voters. Just as long as you're willing to come out with an informed decision, fine. Let it be no, let it be yes. I don't really care. But I'm frustrated to see so little advocacy into the neighborhood and let's stop blaming anybody for that advocacy and let's start taking some personal responsibility to say, hey, did you know this is happening? Here's some good information. I don't know. Sorry. That's my grand.
We're
Sorry.
going to do one more question. Or two.
I just wanted to add that, every year, there's a huge conference that happens, in Las Vegas, and there's one that happens in Chicago. And Batavia is, always there with their bright colors and talking about, this Randall Road. Economic development is 2 things. Either you're exporting goods from big companies or you're importing people. And that's why, Batavia has been so successful, is because, they're doing both. They're importing people and they're exporting, goods. And so I just think that it's important that as we continue, and I know that you're new here and things like that, that we need to, if we take anything away from that, we need to, one, be out there. As I said, Batavia is at, it's called ICSC, it's the International Shopping Center Conference. They're there every year here, they have a table, they're not only, promoting Batavia, they're talking about Kane County, they're talking about the, incentives and things that are there, as well. Westchester, needs to be there. And they need to be there at the forefront, saying that, this is not a good place to live, this is a great place to live, so that we can start to repopulate. Because maybe you don't ask for home rule or referendum, maybe you get to 25,000 people, by importing people, which is economic development. So I applaud your town, I see you guys a lot, and,
I've got a smooth talker I sent in there to do that. Probably a shovel.
they're great.
Does anybody else have one more question?
I'm just curious, the example you gave about the, say your neighbor had doing curry bears on the lawn, blah, 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 and he said under home rule, they could give them a notice and in 5 days they have to be out or whatever the case is. Well, as Westchester is now, what if I called up? My neighbor has all these cars, he's repairing and he's this, he's that. How would you handle that situation not being home ruled as we are now?
We're still able to go out there and issue tickets for blights and compliance issues, and we do that, and we are able to find them and to get them to remove their property.
Okay, so there is a way to handle it.
Yes, home rule, you're able to institute a little bit stiffer fines.
Okay.
So
All right,
it's
thank you.
different.
So I want to thank Mayor.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Jeff. There is some paper back there and pens. If you have any comments on maybe an idea or anything, just put it down on this table.